Good morning, Benjamin.
Good morning, Megan.
Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about what I do.
Let's talk about what you do, but first, let's talk about what we are celebrating with this Monday starting.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to say the Los Angeles Dodgers won the World Series for a second time in a row, and so today will be a large parade in downtown LA and a celebration at Dodger Stadium. So a lot going on. Yep.
And it's exciting to see the city come together for a celebration and positive things.
Exactly. I think what you said. Focused on something about Los Angeles that's positive.
Focusing on something about Los Angeles, you started a company turning data into pathways for success. Benjamin, what led you to start the company, Pactriglo, and what value do you hope that this interview can give to watchers and listeners?
I'm going to be talking for a little while answering that question, but I started Pactriglo in 2016 to compute the underutilized existing zoning in the city of LA. Most of your viewers and listeners will probably know a little bit about real estate and that a property comes with zoning and land use restrictions, even though you own the property. Typically, if it's in a city, an incorporated city, or certainly in a major metropolitan city like Los Angeles, there's going to be um, some restrictions on what you can do with it and what type of and size structure you can build on it. And that's really called zoning and land use. And that's managed often by the Department of City Planning in the city of LA. And so there are properties which have, let's say, maybe the multifamily zoning, and they may only be a single family home on them at this time. And so they represent an opportunity to create more housing units um, under the existing, rules and regulations. And that benefits builders and developers because they don't have to go through a very lengthy zoning change process. And so I set out to create a system that calculated that in 2016. The reason I sort of got that place was I had some history with the city of Los Angeles and knew a lot about the bureaucracy and where projects often get bottlenecked in terms of delayed, and that was in the zoning and entitlement process. And I had this realization because in late 2015, I traveled through China and saw Beijing and Shanghai and mega cities that I'd never been in my entire life. I mean, 20, 25, 30 million people. And I came back to Los Angeles and I literally am in the plane coming down to LAX, and that's something I'd done hundreds of times before. But I looked at the city, and for the first time in my life, it looked somewhat small compared to where I'd been and what I'd seen. And I thought to myself, okay, this is maybe 100 years of urban development. What will the next 100 years of the city's growth look like? And necessarily, I realized, and I didn't know it at the time, it's called urban infill, but I didn't know at the time, but I realized that it's going to necessarily be denser and more vertical construction than what we have now. And you see that pattern in cities across the world in the United States. You then get to New York and you see over time how New York grew and then became denser and then it became sort of wall to wall and vertical development. You see that happening in many American cities, and you get to Los Angeles, and for the first sort of century, we kind of grew out. They call sprawl. Well, sprawl has a maximum point, it turns out, which is where workers and people stop wanting to commute. Super lengthy commutes involving, hour more potentially. And so sprawl sort of then reaches its maximum, and then you have the urban infill, and that's where the pockets of opportunity that exist happen because for whatever reason, maybe an area has been rezoned to multifamily or it was just never fully developed to what its potential was. And then after January's fires here in LA, I thought about how can I contribute to the rebuilding recovery, and I decided rather than do what I would normally do, which would be an analysis for a particular client, maybe on an exclusive basis, sold at a very high premium because of the lucrative information. I would do the work, but make it available to everybody at a lower price. And so what I came to do was identified the perimeters of the two fires, the Palisades Fire and the Eaton Fire, and all of the properties that were inside of them, applied the damage level as had been surveyed by CAL FIRE to determine which ones were destroyed versus damaged versus not damaged even, but might still have some need for renovation due to the smoke damage, etc. And combined with owner information and other details having to do with the zoning and the buildability, let's call it, or speed of building of the particular properties, and have been, offering that to architects and builders and contractors and developers for the last several months.
Mhm. So your data is helping people understand what risks lie in areas, what the value of the properties could look like.
What I do is apply my knowledge from the last decade of working with developers to understand the characteristics that concern them about a property. So things like whether or not a property is in the coastal zone, California coastal zone, whether or not a property is in Los Angeles's hillside ordinance area, which comes with its own sort of set of standards for engineering and design and everything else like that. Um, Also, obviously, fire zone has become a huge concern in terms of what can be rebuilt in some of these areas, and that comes into a play in the Eaton Fire Altadena area, where certain things are now going to be prohibited in the severe fire zone area, the very severe high fire zone area, but also things like uh, uh, landslide areas, what we call liquefaction, which is a earthquake, activity in terms of how the soil might act in an earthquake, and flood zone, which is not really too applicable in either of these areas, although there is some in the Palisades that does come into effect. And so, what anyone who works with my data can do is figure out of the well-defined universe of these two fire areas, these two geographic areas, which properties line up with their, maybe we use the baseball analogy, but which properties line up with their strike zone that they can pitch to. So they're throwing pitches that align with their best chances of getting the work, or using the data to otherwise tailor their pitches so that they're taking things like, let's say, the size of the prior structure, and okay, well, maybe I've only built 3,000 square foot homes. Probably I'd be a good match to try to go out and look for people that lost 3,000 square foot homes and show them the work that you have done in the past and say, hey, I've already done this work, because that's really what a lot of property owners are going to be concerned about at this stage is, what has the builder or contractor done in the past? Have they worked in the city of Los Angeles and all of its intricacies and all the things that happen? Have they done any work in the specific areas like the Palisades or Malibu or Altadena? And what is their track record in terms of delivering on time and on budget? And so contractors, builders can match what they have to offer with the property owners that are looking for that. If it's high end, ridgeline, hillside homes, okay, the data will help you find those and identify them, and you can go after that work. But that may not be everybody. And really, at this stage, there's so much rebuilding to do that someone can actually go in and look at the data and say, okay, I should just maybe start designing product that fits, 50-foot wide lots that, have maybe this much depth. And because there are, let's say 2,000 lots that might meet that criteria, they can figure that out from my data. And then they can sort of look at, hey, I can at least conceptualize or show these folks what I've done in the past that matches what they have and what they need, and really fine tune the marketing message to the customer. If your strength is renovations and remodelings, you may want to go after smoke damaged homes. Well, how would you figure out what those are? Those are properties that had been inside the perimeter of the fire, but were completely destroyed. call them remediations, because there's a fire remediation that needs to happen. Even if a property completely survived the fire, chances are it smells like smoke. And just from my own personal family history, I can remember that smoke smell can linger if the remediation is not done correctly. You definitely have a lot of projects that you could go after in terms of renovating and remodeling the house. That mean taking out all of the carpet, the plaster, drywall, whatever it may be, and redoing the inside so that it doesn't have that smoke smell anymore, versus, let's say, a complete rebuild, which would be a ground up type of project. And that's really ultimately, it's about helping clients and customers maximize their marketing effort. People might be just mailing to, let's say, a complete zip code list. Well, you're going to be mailing to people that have rebuilds, people that have remediations, people that, what is your message to them? Are you going to be offering everything to everybody? Or do you find, just a little bit of effort and energy saves your kind of, I call spray and pray approach, right? Where you just sort of want to cover the whole area and hope something comes back. Or do you articulate your strengths to the audience that's looking for that particular service or product? And that's really where data helps come in and fine tune somebody's effort and marketing outreach in terms of matching their chances of success, and frankly saving them some money in the long term, because they're not over blasting to an audience that may not be interested in them. They've defined an audience that probably does need their help, or someone like them to help them, and they're focused on reaching them. And that also helps because on the inbound, because if you're doing a big sort of spray and pray, you're going to get all kinds of inbound calls potentially that you're going to now have to filter and put energy and effort into to see if they match for you. If you're targeted in your outreach and marketing effort, those inbound calls that are coming in some ways you almost already have pre-qualified them and screened them so that you know that they're a match for what you can do. So it's difficult because so many contractors and builders are used to getting work through referral that this is all very new to them. And it's, and understandably, but the volume of the work that is out there almost necessitates that anybody who wants to grow in this opportunity find a way to reach that audience, and I'm hopefully offering a way that folks can reach that audience.
Thank you for explaining how this data helps. And then one thing you mentioned in an email that was fascinating, and you also brought up a issue that can be affecting current builders. I know this is a talk in government structuring, international entities coming in and kind of changing what I think would be the dynamics of the city. What's happening with zoning in these areas now?
Really not a lot, and meaning the status quo is being maintained. You certainly heard a lot of discussion early on about reimagining some of these areas and what could they be rebuilt as, or how could they be rebuilt. And I think what the affected property owners, and I've talked with many, and sort of pushback was, we just want to rebuild the way it was. Then we can have some other talk about reimagining. And a couple leaders came out and said, this is about rebuilding, not reimagining. And so there are going to be small pockets of properties that will be redeveloped, most likely into something they weren't before. That's part of the market dynamics. I think, there's a small number of commercial properties in the Palisades area that might see something like that, because it may be the only way to make sense financially to rebuild some of the retail spaces. Might be something, a combination of, let's say, retail with residential on top.
Mixed use.
Yeah, mixed use, correct. Yeah, absolutely. And there's certainly this less, I think, in the Altadena area with respect to that. I think folks there really just want to get back onto their property in some kind of way they can use it. And I think that's similar with the Palisades. Individual properties are going to certainly look at what do we rebuild as? Is it a larger structure? Is it, or do we adopt the sort of like for like rebuild that speeds through, potentially the review process, or do they, benefit from, the opportunity to rebuild and maybe something else? And those are all calculations that individual property owners are making now. And what I have been encouraging businesses and to do, builders and contractors and architects, is to get into those conversations so that they are helping these folks understand, the dynamics of their property in terms of what it would cost to revision their property as something maybe larger, or along those lines. That really, to me, is where things are right now. There's a couple, sort of, uh, you have insurance claims, and then you also have the mortgage issue that people are going to be starting to have to repay the mortgages because the forbearance period is about to end in most cases. The 12-month mortgage forbearance that many property owners use have been using, and so they're going to have costs, and they've also got the cost of where they're living now and how long will the insurance company continue to cover that. And there are certain things that can trigger impact to all of those, including selling the property, that might trigger, in some cases, the insurance company no longer covering the additional living expenses of living somewhere else. Um, so you have this kind of calculus, for lack of a better term, or calculations that many property owners are looking at, and it's very challenging. But what I think architects and builders and contractors need to think about is getting involved in those as soon as they can, and getting them, the property owners, to ask them questions and rely on them for sound advice. And that's really where the trust building begins, that leads to, some of these larger, projects and engagements, is building trust early on as a reliable and honest source of good information. There are so many professionals that I've spoken with, that I know you work with, that can contribute meaningfully to the rebuild and recovery, that it's a matter of how do they get in touch with the people that need the help. It's the best way I know how to contribute is to do what I do and provide information that allows professionals to reach the people in need.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's to come can be beautiful and wonderful.
Yeah, of
So thank you for your time today. Thank you
course.
for
Thank you.
your help with the clients. I've seen firsthand the data that you provide
Oh,
for a mailing campaign. We're still designing the postcards, but those are going to go out.
first class postage, don't forget, please. Returns are part of any mailing campaign, as you well know, but very low number. And they all use first class postage to make sure that that mail gets forwarded through.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing. We're almost at time, so
Oh,
I'll wrap here
that
shortly.
went fast.
It did. Thank you for all the info, and I
Thank you,
wish
Megan.
you success. I
Thank you.
wish the people who use your service success.
I'm always available and around for clients. I try to get responsive to them as best I can, and but small shop, and you know how that goes. So anyway,
You've been very helpful. We're at less than a minute, so I will wrap.
ah,
It's been so good talking to you. Thank you so much.
thank you.